The blue light flickered in William's eyes as he gripped his desk tighter. "No, please. I don't want to go," he whispered, his small voice trembling. Mrs. Thompson watched from her classroom doorway as the tall man in the black suit claimed to be William's uncle. Something wasn't right. "Come on, sport. Your aunt's waiting in the car," the man said, reaching for William's arm. But Mrs. Thompson noticed how the 10-year-old boy flinched at his touch. In her 30 years of teaching, she had never seen such raw fear in a child's eyes. The strange blue glow in William's eyes pulsed again. The classroom lights flickered, and a static charge filled the air, making the hairs on Mrs. Thompson's arms stand up. The uncle took a step back, his hand moving to touch something inside his jacket. "William has to finish his math test," Mrs. Thompson said firmly, stepping between them. "School policy. No early dismissals during testing." She was lying, but something in her gut told her she couldn't let this man take William. The man's face hardened. "This is a family emergency," he insisted, but Mrs. Thompson saw how his eyes kept darting to William's face, studying the strange blue light that seemed to dance in the boy's pupils. "Then you won't mind waiting 15 minutes, Mrs. Thompson replied, her hand protectively on William's shoulder. She felt him trembling beneath her touch, but there was something else too, a subtle vibration, like electricity running through his small frame. The man checked his watch, his jaw clenching. "Fine. 15 minutes. He stepped back into the hallway, pulling out a phone. As soon as he was out of earshot, William looked up at Mrs. Thompson, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't let him take me," he begged. "He's not my uncle. They're not human. They took my parents, and now they want me too." The classroom lights flickered more intensely now, and Mrs. Thompson's old silver necklace began to float, drawn toward William like a magnet. She should have dismissed his words as imagination, should have called the principal or security. But as she looked into those strange, glowing blue eyes, she knew. Something extraordinary was happening in her ordinary classroom, and she was now part of it. Her decision in the next 15 minutes would change not only William's life but the fate of so much more. She took a deep breath and squeezed William's shoulder. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I won't let them take you." The boy's eyes widened with hope, the blue light dimming slightly. Outside the classroom, she could hear the uncle talking in a strange, guttural language that certainly wasn't English. Mrs. Thompson knew she had just become the only thing standing between a frightened boy and whatever dark forces were trying to claim him. And she was ready to fight. Mrs. Thompson guided William into the school library, her mind racing. The librarian, Mrs. Baker, was an old friend who she could trust. As they walked between the tall shelves, she noticed how the computer screens flickered when William passed by. "We'll be safe here for a moment," Mrs. Thompson whispered, leading him to a quiet corner. Through the window, she spotted two more men in black suits joining William's supposed uncle in the parking lot. Their movements were too precise, almost mechanical. Mrs. Baker brought them William's student file. Mrs. Thompson's hands trembled as she opened it. Just as she suspected, there was no uncle listed in his emergency contacts. Only his parents, Dr. James and Dr. Emily Carter, both marked as status unknown after their disappearance 2 months ago. They were working late at the lab, William said softly, staring at his parents' names. "Dad called me that night. He said if anything happened, I should trust the blue light. That it would protect me." His voice cracked. The next morning, they were gone. The police found their car by the lake, but he couldn't finish. Mrs. Thompson read the police report attached to the file. The Carter's car had been found empty, with strange burn marks on the hood. The lake water nearby had shown unusual electrical activity, but no bodies were ever recovered. "William," Mrs. Thompson asked gently, "what were your parents working on?" Before he could answer, all the library's lights began to flicker wildly. The computers turned on by themselves, their screens filling with strange symbols. William's eyes glowed brighter, and books started falling off the shelves. "They're getting closer," he whispered fearfully. "I can feel them. The energy they give off, it's not from Earth." Mrs. Baker rushed over, her face pale. "There are men in suits at every exit," she reported. "They're showing some kind of government badges, but something's off about them." Mrs. Thompson looked at the security camera feed on the library computer. The men moved in perfect synchronization, their heads turning at identical angles. One of them looked directly at the camera, and for a split second, his eyes reflected the light like a cat's. "Your parents," Mrs. Thompson said, pieces falling into place. "They discovered something, didn't they? Something these beings don't want humans to know about?" William nodded. "Dad said they found a way to harness energy from another dimension. He said it could change everything, no more pollution, no more energy crisis." He touched his chest. "Before they disappeared, they gave me something. Dad said it would keep me safe until they could come back." The temperature in the library dropped suddenly. Through the windows, Mrs. Thompson saw dark clouds gathering, even though it had been sunny moments ago. The men in suits were entering the building. Mrs. Baker pulled out her phone. "My brother works for the local news. Last month, he investigated a story about strange lights over the lake where William's parents disappeared. The government shut him down, but he kept his research." Mrs. Thompson made a quick decision. "Call him. We need somewhere safe to go." She turned to William, whose blue eyes were now pulsing like a heartbeat. "Whatever your parents gave you, whatever they discovered, these beings wanted badly enough to pose as humans. But they didn't count on one thing." "What's that?" William asked. Mrs. Thompson smiled determinedly. "They didn't count on a teacher who's been protecting children for 30 years. And I'm not about to stop now." The library doors burst open. As the suited figures entered, Mrs. Thompson grabbed William's hand. "Ready to run?" The blue light in his eyes flared, and suddenly, every electronic device in the library exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into darkness. Their escape was about to begin. Thunder cracked overhead as Mrs. Thompson's old Toyota sped through the rain. William sat in the back seat, hunched down below the windows. Every streetlight they passed flickered and went dark, leaving a trail of darkness behind them. "They're still following," Mrs. Baker's brother Tom said from the passenger seat, checking his rearview mirror. 2 black SUVs had been tailing them since they left the school. "But I think I know somewhere we can lose them." Mrs. Thompson gripped the steering wheel tighter. They'd barely made it out of the school, slipping through a back entrance during the blackout William had caused. The rain had started the moment they got in the car, and it wasn't natural rain, it was too heavy, too directed, like someone was using the weather itself to try to slow them down. "William," Mrs. Thompson called over the thunder, "how are you holding up?" "I'm okay," he answered, but his voice was strained. "But they're doing something. I can feel them trying to pull at me. Like they're trying to wake up whatever's inside me." Tom turned around in his seat. "Just like the energy readings by the lake. Kid, your parents weren't just studying alternative energy, were they? They found something else. Something alive." The car swerved as one of the black SUVs pulled alongside them. Through the rain-streaked window, Mrs. Thompson caught a glimpse of the driver. His movements were rigid, his head turning towards them in a way that no human neck could move. "Hold on," she shouted, making a sharp turn down a narrow side street. The Toyota scraped against the wall, sending sparks flying, but they made it. The SUV behind them was too wide for the turn. "There's an old power station up ahead," Tom said. "It was abandoned years ago after a mysterious meltdown. The government keeps people away, but I've been investigating it. The energy readings there match what I found at the lake. William sat up straighter. That's it. That's where they took my parents. I can feel them, they're alive. Suddenly, their car's engine sputtered and died. All the dashboard lights went dark. They were rolling to a stop, and the second SUV was closing in fast. No, 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 Mrs. Thompson turned the key, but nothing happened. Rain pounded on the roof. It's them, William said, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. They're trying to shut down anything electrical around me. But... He closed his eyes, concentrating. The blue light spread from his eyes, flowing down his arms like glowing veins. The car's engine roared back to life, but something was different. The speedometer was spinning wildly, and blue electricity crackled around the hood. Mrs. Thompson, William said, his voice eerily calm, I can power the car, but you need to drive fast. Really fast. She looked in the rearview mirror, saw his glowing form, and understood. Her foot pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Toyota shot forward with impossible speed, blue lightning trailing behind them. Tom gripped his seat. The power station's just ahead, but the road's blocked. They never cleared the wreckage from the meltdown. Mrs. Thompson saw the pile of twisted metal and concrete ahead. The SUV was still behind them, gaining. And beyond the wreckage, through the rain, she could see it, the abandoned power station, its towers reaching into the storm clouds like skeletal fingers. William's voice came from the back seat, strong and certain, don't stop. Taking a deep breath, Mrs. Thompson kept her foot on the accelerator. They were about to find out exactly what William could do, and hopefully, his parents too. The wreckage rushed toward them as blue light filled the car completely. Their real journey was just beginning. Blue light enveloped the car as they approached the wreckage. For a moment, Mrs. Thompson felt weightless, like they were floating. The twisted metal ahead seemed to blur and part, creating a tunnel of rippling air. They passed through impossibly, the car's frame humming with energy. Dimensional phasing, William gasped from the back seat, his voice tired. That's what Dad called it. We just passed through the solid matter like it wasn't there. Tom was frantically checking his instruments. The energy readings are off the scale. Whatever your parents discovered, William, it's not just about power generation. They found a way to manipulate the basic laws of physics. The abandoned power station loomed before them, its concrete walls stained with age. But as they got closer, Mrs. Thompson noticed something strange. Through the rain, she could see faint blue lights pulsing within the structure, matching the rhythm of William's eyes. There's a hidden entrance, William said, pointing to what looked like a solid wall. I can feel it. The same energy that's in me, it's everywhere here. They parked behind some old equipment, hiding from the pursuing SUVs. As they stepped out of the car, Mrs. Thompson felt a strange tingling in the air, like static electricity but stronger. William, she asked gently, what exactly did your parents give you? The boy placed his hand over his heart. They called it the seed. Dad said it was a piece of something they found, something that fell from the sky. They studied it for years, learning its secrets. But then they came, the ones pretending to be human. Mom and Dad said they had no choice, they had to hide the seed somewhere safe. Inside you, Tom realized. They put it inside you. William nodded. The night they disappeared, they performed some kind of procedure. Dad said the seed would bond with me, protect me. He said I was the only one who could keep it safe because... His voice broke. Because I was the only one who could love it like it was part of me. Suddenly, alarms blared from Tom's equipment. They're here, he warned. And they're not trying to hide anymore. The air rippled, and 3 figures stepped out of nothing, the men in suits, but their faces were changing, becoming something inhuman. Their skin had a metallic sheen, and their eyes were solid black. The seed belongs to us, one of them said, its voice a harsh electronic buzz. "Give us the boy, and you may live." Mrs. Thompson stepped in front of William protectively. "He's not a container for your technology. He's a child, and that seed is part of him now. You can't have either." The creatures moved forward with impossible speed. But before they could reach William, blue light exploded from his body. The aliens were thrown back, their forms flickering like bad television reception. "Mom. Dad." William whispered, his eyes fixed on the power station. "They're calling me. The seed, it knows the way." Tom's instruments sparked and died. "Whatever you're going to do it fast. Those things are adapting to your energy signature." Mrs. Thompson took William's hand, feeling the power coursing through him. "Then let's go get your parents." Together, they ran toward the hidden entrance William had sensed. Behind them, the aliens were recovering, their forms solidifying into something truly terrifying. But as William's power flowed stronger, Mrs. Thompson realized something: the seed wasn't just a piece of alien technology. It was giving William exactly what his father had promised: protection, strength, and a way to save his family. They reached the wall, and William pressed his glowing hand against it. Reality itself seemed to bend as an opening appeared. They stepped through, leaving the rain and the aliens behind, entering a hidden world of pulsing blue light and impossible science. The truth about William's gift, and his parents' discovery, was about to be revealed. Inside the power station, reality seemed different. Blue energy pulsed through crystalline structures growing from the walls, creating patterns that hurt the eyes if you looked at them too long. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the sound was coming from multiple directions at once. "The facility extends underground," Tom whispered, pointing to a spiral staircase that seemed to be made of pure light. "These readings, it's like they've built a piece of their world inside ours." Mrs. Thompson kept her hand on William's shoulder as they descended. The boy's eyes were glowing brighter than ever, leaving trails of blue light in the air as he moved. "They're below us," he said. "Mom and Dad, they're using the seed's energy to stay alive. But they're weak." A screeching sound came from above. The aliens had breached the entrance. Their footsteps made metallic clicking sounds against the crystal floors, getting closer. "This way," William urged, pulling them through a doorway that appeared in what had been solid wall moments before. They found themselves in a vast chamber filled with floating orbs of energy, each one pulsing with a different rhythm. "It's a power matrix," Tom said in awe, his scientific curiosity overtaking his fear for a moment. "They're harvesting energy from other dimensions. Your parents didn't just discover alien technology, they found a way to tap into the fundamental energy of the universe itself." The aliens' voices echoed through the chamber. "The humans cannot control this power. They are children playing with forces beyond their understanding. Give us the seed." William stopped suddenly, his face pale. "They're lying," he said. "I can feel it through the seed. They don't want to protect this power, they want to use it as a weapon. That's why Mom and Dad hid it in me. They knew the seed would be safe with human emotions, human love. These beings, they can't feel anything." A blast of dark energy struck the wall near them, leaving a hole that seemed to lead into infinite darkness. The aliens were getting closer, their forms shifting and changing as they moved, becoming less humanoid and more terrifying. "Run!" Mrs. Thompson shouted. They sprinted through the maze of energy orbs, each one reacting to William's presence, glowing brighter as he passed. The aliens followed, but the orbs seemed to dim around them, as if the very energy of the facility was choosing sides. They reached another staircase, this one made of twisting metal that moved like liquid under their feet. "The containment chamber is down there," William said, his voice stronger now. "That's where they're keeping them." Suddenly, one of the aliens appeared in front of them, its form now a writhing mass of metallic tentacles and dark energy. "The seed has changed you, child," it said. You are becoming something new. Something dangerous. William stood straighter, the blue light now surrounding him like a protective cocoon. No, he said firmly. I'm becoming exactly what my parents knew I could be, someone who can protect this power, not abuse it. The alien lunged forward, but William raised his hand. A pulse of pure energy erupted from him, not just pushing the alien back but changing it, forcing it to return to its humanoid form. For a moment, Mrs. Thompson saw fear in its black eyes. They're not as strong as they want us to think, William said. The facility's power, it responds to emotion, to connection. That's what my parents discovered. That's why they chose me. Tom's equipment started beeping frantically. More of them are coming. A lot more. Mrs. Thompson looked at William, saw the determination in his glowing eyes. Then we better get to your parents before they arrive. They ran down the liquid metal stairs, the facility's energy responding to William's every step, lighting their way and blocking their pursuers. They were close now, so close to finding William's parents and uncovering the full truth about the power that had changed everything. Behind them, in the darkness, countless pairs of black eyes watched, and the real battle was about to begin. The containment chamber was a perfect sphere of swirling energy, suspended in a vast underground cavern. William stood before it, his blue light pulsing in sync with the barrier that separated him from his parents. The seed knows what to do, he said softly, but I have to learn to control it first. If I get it wrong. He looked at Mrs. Thompson, fear mixing with determination in his glowing eyes. Tom checked his instruments. We have maybe 20 minutes before their reinforcements arrive. Whatever you're going to do, it has to be fast. Mrs. Thompson watched as William closed his eyes, concentrating. The blue light flowed from him in waves, touching the containment field. At first, nothing happened. Then she saw it. Patterns forming in the energy, like a language written in light. It's teaching me, William whispered, his hands moving through the air, conducting an invisible symphony of power. The seed, it's not just energy. It's knowledge. Everything my parents learned, everything these beings know about dimensional energy, it's all here. The chamber rumbled as William worked. Above them, they could hear the aliens approaching, their metallic footsteps echoing through the facility. But something was different now. The fear that had driven their escape was being replaced by something else, purpose. Look, Tom pointed to the walls. The crystalline structures were changing, responding to William's movements. He's not just learning to use the power, he's learning to control the entire facility. Mrs. Thompson understood now why William's parents had chosen him. She'd seen it in her classroom, his capacity for learning, for understanding. The seed hadn't given him power, it had given him understanding. Mrs. Thompson, William called, his voice strained but steady, I need your help. The containment field, it's like a puzzle. But it's not about patterns or numbers. It's about. He struggled to find the words. Connection, she finished, stepping forward. Just like in the classroom. When you're stuck on a problem, sometimes you need someone to help you see it differently. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and the blue light spread to her. In that moment, she saw what he saw, the energy wasn't just power, it was alive. It responded to emotion, to intention. That's it, William smiled, his movements becoming more confident. The aliens think this power is just a tool, but my parents knew better. They knew it had to be protected by someone who could understand it, care for it. The containment field began to pulse faster. Through its swirling surface, Mrs. Thompson caught glimpses of two figures, William's parents, suspended in the energy, waiting. But then alarms blared. Tom's equipment flashed red. They're here. Dozens of them. The aliens poured into the chamber, their forms shifting between human and something else. Their leader stepped forward, its black eyes fixed on William. You cannot comprehend the forces you are wielding, child, it said. The seed is not meant for human minds. William didn't turn around. His hands kept moving, working with the energy. You're wrong, he said calmly. The seed showed me everything, why you really want it, what you plan to do with its power. But you made a mistake. And what mistake is that? The alien asked, its form flickering with dark energy. You thought power was about control. William's eyes blazed brighter than ever. But my parents taught me differently. Real power. He looked at Mrs. Thompson, smiled, then turned to face the aliens. Real power comes from protecting what you love. The chamber exploded with blue light as William began the final phase of his training. The battle for the seed, and the future of two worlds, was about to reach its climax. Around them, reality itself began to bend as William's newfound understanding of the power clashed with the aliens' dark intentions. The true test was about to begin. The chamber filled with swirling blue and black energy as William faced the aliens. The containment field behind him pulsed with increasing intensity, his parents' figures becoming clearer with each wave of power. Mom. Dad. William's voice carried through the chaos. I understand now. The seed wasn't just about keeping it safe. You wanted me to learn what you discovered. Dr. James Carter's voice echoed from within the containment field, weak but clear, the energy, it's conscious, son. It chose us because we saw what these beings couldn't. The alien leader's form rippled with dark energy. The humans fill your heads with emotions, with weakness. The power exists to be controlled, to reshape reality as we see fit. No, Dr. Emily Carter's voice joined her husband's. That's why it rejected you. The energy responds to connection, to understanding. You tried to dominate it, and it fought back. Mrs. Thompson watched as the truth unfolded. The crystalline walls displayed images, memories of William's parents working in their lab, discovering the first seeds of energy that had fallen to Earth. They hadn't just found a new power source, they'd made first contact with a form of life that existed between dimensions. The seed in William, Tom said, understanding dawning on his face, it's not a weapon or a tool. It's alive. And it chose him. William nodded, his hands moving through the air, weaving streams of blue light. It was lonely, he said softly. Lost between worlds. Like I was after you took my parents. But now. His eyes blazed. Now we understand each other. The alien leader launched a blast of dark energy, but William deflected it effortlessly. The seed's power had fully awakened, responding to his empathy, his desire to protect rather than control. Your parents discovered our presence, the alien snarled, interfered with our plans. We would have reshaped this primitive world, brought order to chaos. You mean destroyed everything that makes us human? Mrs. Thompson stepped forward. The messiness, the emotions, the connections, that's not weakness. That's why the energy chose us. William's parents pressed their hands against the containment field from inside. Son, his father called, the field works both ways. They're not just keeping us in. They're keeping themselves out, William finished. Because they know what would happen if the energy was free to choose. Understanding flooded through William. His hands moved in new patterns, not fighting the containment field but working with it. The blue light spread through the facility, touching every crystal, every shadow. The aliens attacked as one, their forms merging into a wave of darkness. But William stood his ground, Mrs. Thompson at his side. The seed's power flowed through him, not as a weapon, but as a bridge between worlds. You want to see what real power looks like? William asked, his voice carrying the wisdom of two worlds. Let me show you what my parents discovered. The chamber erupted with light as William began the process that would not just free his parents, but reveal the true nature of the energy that had brought them all together. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the aliens were about to learn why love and understanding would always be stronger than control and fear. The discovery was complete. Now it was time for action. The chamber erupted into chaos as William channeled the seed's full power. Blue light intertwined with the containment field's energy, creating a dazzling display of dimensional forces. Mrs. Thompson and Tom braced themselves as reality itself seemed to bend around them. "You've made your choice then," the alien leader's voice distorted, its form splitting into multiple writhing shadows. "If we cannot control the power, we will destroy it, and this facility with it." Dark energy poured from the aliens, clashing with William's blue light. The boy stood firm, his hands moving in precise patterns he'd learned from the seed. Each gesture redirected the dark energy, turning it back on itself. "William," his mother called from within the containment field. "The resonance pattern. Remember what the seed showed you?" William nodded, understanding flowing through him. His movements changed, and the blue light began to pulse in a specific rhythm. The crystalline walls responded, humming with the same frequency. Mrs. Thompson watched in awe as the facility itself came alive. The energy patterns she'd seen William learning now spread through every surface, every crystal. The power station wasn't just a building, it was an instrument, and William was learning to play it. "Tom," she called over the dimensional thunder. "The readings. What's happening?" Tom checked his equipment, his eyes widening. "The energy signatures, they're synchronizing. William's not just fighting them, he's rewriting the rules of how their technology works." The alien leader realized it too late. As its forces pressed their attack, William's resonating energy began to affect their forms. Their carefully maintained humanoid shapes started to flicker, revealing their true nature, beings of pure energy, trapped between dimensions. "You fear human emotion because you lost your own," William said, his voice carrying the seed's ancient wisdom. "But feeling isn't weakness. It's what gives the power purpose." He raised his hands, and the blue light intensified. The containment field began to pulse in sync with his movements. Inside, his parents pressed their hands against the barrier, adding their own understanding to their son's power. The aliens launched a final, desperate attack. Dark energy crashed against William's defenses like a tidal wave. For a moment, it seemed overwhelming. But then Mrs. Thompson grabbed William's hand, and Tom placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not alone," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "You never were." The blue light exploded outward, not as a weapon, but as a wave of pure understanding. It washed over the aliens, and for the first time in centuries, they felt. They felt the love between William and his parents, the protective instinct of a teacher for her student, the wonder of discovery that had driven the Carters' research. The alien leader screamed, its form destabilizing. What is this?" "This is what my parents discovered," William said calmly. "The power doesn't want to be controlled or destroyed. It wants to connect." With a final surge of energy, the containment field shattered. But instead of chaos, there was harmony. The facility's power flowed freely, guided by William's understanding, strengthened by human emotion. The aliens found themselves transformed, their dark energy absorbed and purified by the seed's power. Their true forms emerged, beings of pure light, no longer trapped between dimensions. As William's parents stepped free of the containment field, the battle ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The alien centuries-old quest for control had been answered by a 10-year-old boy who understood that the greatest power comes from letting go. The chamber filled with peaceful blue light as the transformed aliens rose toward the ceiling, preparing to return to their own dimension. But this time, they carried with them a new understanding, one that would change both their world and ours. The battle was over. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead, helping both worlds understand what William and his parents had discovered about the true nature of power. Morning sunlight streamed through the power station's windows, casting rainbow patterns through the crystalline structures that now glowed with gentle blue light. William sat between his parents on an old bench, Mrs. Thompson and Tom watching as the facility hummed with peaceful energy. "So what happens now?" Mrs. Thompson asked, looking at the transformed power station that would never again be truly abandoned. Dr. James Carter smiled, his arm around William. "Now we do what we should have done from the beginning, share our discovery with the world, but carefully, responsibly. The seed showed us all something important," Dr. Emily Carter added, running her fingers through William's hair. "Power isn't meant to be hidden or controlled. It's meant to be understood and shared." William's eyes still held a faint blue glow, but it was softer now, more natural. "The aliens, they're not coming back, are they? Not to fight, at least." "No," his father assured him. "What you did, showing them the true nature of the energy, helping them feel again, you gave them back something they'd lost centuries ago. They'll be watching, learning, but as allies now, not enemies." Tom checked his instruments one last time. "The energy readings are stable. The facility is actually cleaning up environmental pollution from the surrounding area. It's healing the damage done by the old power plant." Mrs. Thompson watched as William stood up and walked to one of the crystals. He placed his hand on it, and blue light rippled through the facility. "You knew, didn't you?" she asked his parents. "You knew the seed would choose him?" Dr. Emily Carter nodded. "We studied the energy for years, but William, he understood it instinctively. Children often see truth more clearly than adults. They understand that power isn't about control, it's about connection, about helping others. That's what makes you a great teacher, Mrs. Thompson," William said, turning to her with a smile. "You don't just teach, you connect. You understand." The facility's lights pulsed warmly, responding to the emotion in the room. Dr. James Carter stood, addressing them all. "We have a lot of work ahead of us. The world isn't ready for everything we've discovered, but we can start small. Clean energy, environmental restoration, bringing people together. And I can still go to school?" William asked hopefully, making everyone laugh. "Of course," his mother hugged him. "But maybe no more mysterious uncles picking you up early." Mrs. Thompson smiled, remembering the frightened boy from just days ago. Now he stood tall, confident not in his power, but in his understanding of it. "You'll always have a place in my classroom, William," she said. "Though maybe we'll need to update the science curriculum a bit." The morning light grew stronger, and the facility responded, its crystals creating a beautiful display of color and energy. It was no longer a place of secrets and fear, but a beacon of hope, proof that understanding and compassion were stronger than any force in the universe. As they walked out together into the sunlight, William looked back at the power station. The seed's energy flowed through him gently now, a reminder that the greatest discoveries often come not from seeking power, but from being willing to understand, to connect, and most importantly, to love. The world was changing, but with William, his parents, and people like Mrs. Thompson helping guide that change, the future looked brighter than ever. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't what we can control, but what we can understand and share with others. And in a classroom not far away, a crystal sat on Mrs. Thompson's desk, glowing softly blue, a reminder that the greatest lessons often come from the heart.